Suzanne Souter. Councilperson Suzanne Souter.
You're muted.
Sorry, present.
Councilperson Russell Smith.
Present.
Councilperson Joseph Day.
Present.
Councilperson Valerie Leary.
Present.
City Solicitor Losco.
Present.
Police Chief McCabe.
Here.
City Treasurer Janet Carlin.
Here.
City Administrator Bill Barthel.
I'm here.
Mayor Michael Quaranta. And Building Official Jeff Bergstrom. I believe that's everyone.
Okay, thank you. Before we start this meeting, I just want to explain why we're back to Zoom all of a sudden. I guess it was 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. I see the mayor did join us, so you can mark him present. About 2 weeks ago, when this Omicron virus started to cross South Africa and Europe, I talked to the mayor, the city administrator, and just for everyone's safety and just kind of keep the distance. And once again, and since we're still under a state of emergency with the governor, we are allowed to still meet via Zoom or electronically. Our charter does say we should meet in person, but due to the state of emergency, I thought it was for everybody's benefit and everybody's safety to meet by Zoom. So hopefully it's very temporary and we will get back to meeting in person as soon as possible. Thank you. First is approval of the minutes for November 9th, 2021 and minutes for December 14th, regular council meeting, December 14th, 2021. Do I have a motion for the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Report from the treasurer.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. This report is the unaudited report as of December 31st, 2021. The unrestricted funds are $6,513,160.28. Total restricted funds, $2,973,045.07. Total cash in the accounts, $9,486,205.35. There is nothing remarkable about this time of year. We're into this mission 6 months, and we are at 77% of the budgeted revenue having been collected. Of course, we'll be talking about that next Wednesday at length, I'm sure. So really, everything is in good shape. Thank you.
Ms. Carlin. Any questions for the treasurer?
Just that in some cases, we seem to be in very good shape. And I'm just wondering about that. That's a good thing.
Yes.
The property tax transfers, 172%. Is that relating to the apartments?
Yes, it is.
Tax
Riverbend, we got $93,000 in July
Okay.
for that.
Tax penalties. Sorry.
Excuse me. Tax penalties. Yeah, that's about the same as what last year we were at 153%.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Engineering planning reimbursement 850%. Of course, that's
Yes.
not a big number. Okay.
It is a big number, but we had a survey done, and we got reimbursed for that at $5,500, and that's why that jumped up there that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that at that small amount, that percentage can jump up. All right.
Yes.
It's all good news, I think. So, but I'm just.
Yes,
I was just really curious.
it's quite the same average as we have experienced at this time in previous years. We were at 76% last year. Now, the year before, in 2019, it was 69%. But the previous year of 2018, it was 74%. So we're about the same as we have been in past years. As
Okay.
far as revenues collected.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome,
Any
Russ.
other questions for the treasurer? Motion to approve the treasurer's report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Council communication, Mr. Day, would you like to go first?
I'm sorry, Mike, was that me?
Yeah.
Yep. Just a couple things. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of not meeting in person. However, I understand the need for it, and hope that when we do go back to meeting in person, we can continue to broadcast the meetings. I know I've brought that up several times, but I do want to reiterate that I do think that that's something that we should be doing. The next thing I wanted to at least recognize Bill Walters, who passed away recently. Bill was on the planning commission and served the city well, on the planning commission and the planning commission's representative, the HAC. So I did want to say, Bill was a good friend, a good neighbor, and he served this city well. If you hadn't read his obituary, I would encourage you to do so. Bill had a lot of accomplishments, was highly educated, and actually very skilled in basketball as well, which I had no idea. But I did want to mention him and say, he will be sorely missed by the city of Newcastle. As everybody's seen on the agenda, the Board of Adjustment ordinance is on the agenda for to be read and discussed tonight. So I won't go any further into that. I think at the last meeting we talked about talking about charging. We talked about this meeting talking about the charging stations. I don't see that on the agenda, but I do think it's something we need to do. So maybe it gets on the next agenda. But like I said, I think it's just a carryover from last meeting. I believe that's all I have right now.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Moving down the line, Mr. Smith, do you have anything?
I just want to thank Bill for getting the request into the trustees for the city entrance signs. It was a short deadline, and he put together a good package, and I am hopeful.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Souders, do you have anything?
Not tonight, thank you.
Okay. Councilperson Leary, you have anything?
Not tonight, thank you.
Okay. Mayor from the business from the mayor.
Actually, I think you skipped the city administrator and staff.
I was just gonna point that out.
Okay, we can get back to him. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
My prerogative to adjust the agenda.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I didn't know if it was an oversight or you want to just mix it up a little. That's fine. Okay. So, well, good evening, everybody. Emailed a couple of points to everybody. So 2022 is upon us. We hosted a webinar. You mentioned about the current variant, President Platt, and I would encourage everybody. We had Dr. Marcy Dries on for an hour. She's the head of infectious disease and chief of epidemiology at Christiana Care, and she's also on a CDC ACIP board nationally. She's well credentialed. Anyway, we had a very good conversation with her about the variant, its proposed arc, the status of hospitalizations around the state, the declaration of a crisis at the hospital, which gives the hospital the authority to take on patients with in car accidents, strokes, heart attacks, and put them ahead of COVID patients and other less emergency-like situations. All very good. You can find the discussion on YouTube. It's also posted on social media. I draw that to your attention. It's just very, very good. Answer a lot of questions about, is the original vaccine still relevant for today's variants? Are the tests still relevant? We have employers who are showing up with people who have been positive, but they're no longer infectious, but they're positive for sometimes 90 days afterwards because the tests are very sensitive and fragments of while they're not contagious, fragments of COVID can still be present. So all very good stuff for your consideration. Other topics. Sorry about that. In my role on the Municipal Services Commission, I'm going to be meeting along with Scott Blomquist with some of their key customers. I think if you saw their most recent, I don't have it presently in front of me or within reaching distance, but they sent out their newsletter, which I had some hand in helping them kind of think through. They did a very good job of depicting kind of their array of customers. And on the electric side, it's quite clear that they've got a handful of commercial customers that subsidize all the rest of us. One large customer accounts for a substantial part of their overall revenues. And so it's in everyone's best interest that we meet with some of those larger commercial customers, understand what their needs are, their plans are, hopefully for growth and expansion, or if they have plans to leave the city, because that could be a substantial issue for us all. So I think if you have not seen what they sent out to everybody, please take a look at that. I think it was a really good depiction of where the revenues come in for both water and electric usage around the city. Also, I've been in discussions with Mike Connolly from the Newcastle Historical Society about an option of moving what has been the Ad Hoc Arts Council there. Those conversations continue. I know Bill's been looped in on some of those conversations, or not, we haven't had any conversations yet, but we intend to have conversations. So hopefully that becomes a destination point for that effort. If not, the group is willing to move separately and create a new entity. With cold weather upon us, you may spot a person outdoors who does not have a place to go and or find shelter. This recently there was an example of this that came to me via a concerned resident. I reached out to the chief. The chief said residents should be encouraged to dial 911. So the on-duty officers can look in on that person and make determinations about whether or not that person needs to find someplace warm for shelter and rest if the situation warrants that. But we're encouraged to communicate with them if we find people in our community that are in that circumstance, given these very, very cold months. Each month, as we just experienced, we get a really great report from our city treasurer, and I want to publicly thank her for all the years of her dedicated service that she's given to the citizens of our community. She had a terrific private sector career. She, along with Kathy Walls, really do a terrific job for us. Our revenues are probably at historic highs, and if they're not historic highs, they're close to historic highs. And they do a terrific job time and time again. And I am grateful, as I suspect all of you are, for Janet's service and Kathy's support as well. And finally, about 2 weeks ago, you're welcome, Janet. About 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege to swear in a new police officer to our police department. We're grateful for our newest addition, Officer Kyle Young, and his service to our police department, and for his work with the Goodwill Fire Company and his past work in the armed services. I have nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Worthell, do you have anything to report?
I do, Mr. Platt, a few items. An update on ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan Act. We received information from the law firm that I mentioned to you folks, I think a couple of months ago, that the state had hired onto, and we participated with them, with that law firm, Barnes and Thornburg. I received a communication last week that the Department of the Treasury has issued a final rule on that legislation on the coronavirus state fiscal recovery fund. Basically, my understanding from the communication we received from them is that hopefully some of their requirements have loosened up compared to the initial introduction to that plan. I have a webinar scheduled for tomorrow afternoon to get more details on that. But at the same time, and I think I did mention this at a previous council meeting, we continue to look at, and I've received confirmation from the law firm that we can move forward with looking at, and I'm working with Tetra Tech, Layla Hamroon from Tetra Tech on evaluating further our facilities, and the money from that fund can be used for that. And the evaluation, of course, is whether or not we can use those monies to look at building a new complex out at 100 Municipal. So we still continue to move forward with that. But as I said, I'm hoping to get a broader perspective. I'm hoping there's a broader perspective of monies that'll be available based on the on the final rule that it's been introduced. As Mr. Smith pointed out, and I thank you, Mr. Smith, for acknowledging that, we did put in a trustee request for another $6,500 for signage. I'm pretty optimistic that that will be approved. I also wanted to let council know that we've received a communication from the AFSCME union about the need or their desire to open up contract negotiations. Typically, we don't get something from them, or we don't submit something to them until a couple months into the new year. But they have indicated that they are, reminding us that the contract is up. So in the next few weeks, I'll be putting together an offer, and of course, I'll keep council apprised of what we're doing there. Just to remind council, that contract expires at the end of June. But like I said, we will start looking at that, hopefully in the next few weeks. I did want to mention, and I know you're all aware, that George O'Neill is retired as the supervisor to Public Works. And he and I did have a conversation prior to his departure. And I indicated to him that we absolutely would like to do something in his honor, but we'd like to do it. I would like to do it when we go back into an actual in-person meeting. And I think he appreciated that. In fact, I know he does. George worked a long time here, so I think it's a nice thing for us to do in person. That being said, I have advertised, and I think I've notified council. I let council know that I was going to be replacing that position, not as a supervisor, but as a director position. And so we have advertised for that primarily on Indeed.com. We've received about 18 to 22 resumes, and I anticipate starting interviewing for that next week. So anyway, so we'll move forward with that, and hopefully I can get the director's position filled in a timely manner.
What, Bill, excuse me, what's the difference there? Supervisor, director, what?
Supervisor gets in trucks, can actually do labor related work. A director is more of a manager. He's going to manage the correct. And in fact, he's precluded from actually doing any of the labor because he's not a union member. So we're taking we're taking that position out of the union. Quite frankly, I think, as good of a job that George did, and considering that he was part of the union, I don't think that position should be supervised by a union member supervising union workers. So we're going back to a director's position.
Gotcha.
All righty. And then just last Delmarva update. I did hear from them, or I contacted them the other day. They do not yet have exact dates for when they will begin their project that we talked about last month, but they have indicated to me that they are definitively going forward with the project, and that they will be contacting us to get together with them to talk about more of the specifics and more of the exact dates. So, as the months go on and as we come back next month, I'm hoping to have dates for everybody at that point. And of course, as soon as I do, I'll let council know.
Excuse me, Bill, is this the project to examine the elevation of various properties in town and basements and that sort of thing in conjunction with the NREC study, or is this something else?
No, Delmarva. It's the project, the street project, right, yeah.
To bury the,
Well, but they're not gonna, no, they're not.
to
gonna
do
be
the new high pressure gas lines in phase 2.
Correct, that's correct. Yeah.
Mr. Barthel, I have a question. And I did receive a notice that they may want to come into my basement to check, because it just brought it up with Ms. Souders. Do we have to let them in? Is this a mandatory thing, or is this a voluntary type thing,
No,
or?
you don't have to let them in. No, if
Okay.
we're talking about we're not talking about the Delmarva project. Now, you're
Right,
talking
and
about the
I
other
just
project.
jumped in because I jumped in on something different just because Councilperson Souders brought it up.
No, you don't have to, you have no obligation to.
Isn't their main concern whether the lower level, if it's in threat, whether it's finished or not? I got that impression somehow, but that's their,
Well, I think they want to know if your air conditioning, your heaters in your basement, that type of thing. I think
right,
it was,
right.
It was a pretty broad. It was a pretty broad spectrum, I thought.
Yeah, maybe you could just answer questions.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt there.
That's okay. And that's all I have, Mr. Platt.
Bill, before you get away, could you remind us how much is in the recovery fund?
Yes, it's 2.93, 2.9, I think it's 2.93 is what the number is.
Mr. Barthel, anybody from staff have a report? Chief, like to say anything?
I'll tell you, yeah, go ahead, Chief.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, the total would be 2.911,042.32. We have half of it now, which is $1,455,521.16, which is shown on your treasurer's report.
Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome. Sorry, I was muted.
Chief, do you have anything for us?
Thank you. Yeah, briefly, and I want to apologize for the report. I'll have that out to you the next day or two. Unfortunately, I did not avoid the COVID bug, so I've been out for a couple of days and hopefully be back soon. So, but I've reviewed the data. No significant trends this past month. Some of the numbers are actually low. Our calls for service are down a few. So, our guys continue to address the community issues through their contacts are being made. They're getting some good information about certain quality of life issues, and they're jumping on it pretty quick. So that whole concept of the contacts we make in each neighborhood is effective in some areas. As the mayor mentioned, Recruit Young is now no longer a recruit. He graduated, unfortunately, very unceremoniously, has become quite the trend here. But he was sworn in, and he's on FTO now. It's a 12-week process. So within 12 weeks, we should have him out. At the same time, our new hire just started with the Dover Police Academy. This is a new approach for us. Dover's Academy, it existed years ago. They went offline for a little while, and they're starting again because their numbers are so low. They needed help. So they're offering this academy to municipal agencies. And so we jumped on that. We like their curriculum. We met their instructors. Their chief is an incredibly progressive and innovative guy. So anything he touches is probably going to be good. So, and the good news is, we should have him in uniform by separation day, whereas the other academies are close to 8-9 months long. So, and having been to one of those academies, I don't remember learning a whole lot more in the extra 3 months. So, we're excited to get him out. This COVID unfortunately had us close our building to a lot of the things we started to open up. I know I've been talking over the last few months about some of the community projects we're trying to initiate. And once again, we've had to put those on hold. So, but I'll just I'll just say, to put it in everybody's ear, the things that we're looking to do. Captain Schuhart has met with a few groups already that are interested in some of this mental health training. We really do think that's going to be a pretty big, a very valuable tool, especially for some of the local businesses. Citizens Police Academy, we've gotten very close to this curriculum, so that's a big issue that we want to push, to get people to get an inside look at what we're doing in here. And then the last thing internally is, unfortunately, we've had to push back our promotion process probably a couple of weeks. And then, once all this passes, we hope maybe by the next time we meet, if not the time after, I can introduce two new street supervisors. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the chief? Mr. Barthel, anything else?
That's it, Mr. Platt. Thank you.
Thank you. I just got a couple of things. As the treasurer pointed out, we will be meeting next Wednesday for a budget workshop. Now's the time to put the big projects on the table, things to discuss. If there's going to be any extra state money coming our way, just kind of, I think we should definitely all kind of do our homework and just kind of see what's on our wish list, so to say, whether we accomplish it this year or next year, but we should at least discuss it. The second thing I'd like to discuss was, I don't know if anybody saw the Newcastle Weekly last week, but they actually ran an ad from January 3rd, 1990. And one of the agenda items was they were looking for a place to permanently meet. They were actually council at that time was meeting at the parish house at Harmony and the Strand. So that just kind of brought to mind, for me at least, that this has been a 30-year problem. Everybody thinks we've met upstairs in council chambers for 200 years. I don't know that that's to be true, because just reading that agenda, there's something there. I think as we go into the campus and the second studies coming to a head and the numbers are going to start coming in, I think we should all just keep an open mind and just something to think about. Like I said, it's a 30-year problem. We got a chance to solve it. And then I guess the last thing is, I'll piggyback a little bit on what the mayor was talking about with COVID. Evidently, there's an extremely short supply of blood. So if you're able to get out and give blood, because you don't know who you'll be helping. They're starting to stop some surgeries, kids with leukemia, that kind of stuff. So if you can do it, be nice. Thank you. That's all I have. As far as new business, we have a first reading of I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Smith.
On the budget projects, again, we have this conversation every year. We don't do planning, we do budget. And I hope that we could all think of what is it we want to accomplish in the coming fiscal year, not just what do we want to spend money on. That we go back and look at the comprehensive plan and see what is scheduled for the years that we're talking about. We just, this whole year, we didn't talk about anything that we were going to accomplish in the comprehensive plan. And it's not always a monetary issue. It could be the matter of reallocating resources from one thing to another, or just, putting energy into certain things. So it does bother me that we always think about planning in terms of, we got to have more money. And that's not necessarily true.
No, and Mr. Smith, I totally agree with you on that, because that's why I said, put the list together. Let's discuss everything. That's what the workshop's for. You and I agreed on this a few months ago, and I think we're both on the same page as far as that goes.
It might be helpful if we could receive a digital copy of the comp plan. Some of us may have a paper one, but if we could just receive a digital one, so we don't have to kill trees.
Did anybody ever sign that in Dover?
Good question. Mr. Barthel, do you know?
I believe they did. I believe the governor signed it.
Oh,
Yes, it
did
was
he?
signed in
I believe
December.
so.
It was signed.
Yeah.
It was signed in
copy.
December. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay,
Last December.
good to
Yeah.
know.
Okay. Moving on, first reading the ordinance of 534, an ordinance to amend section 230-53, excuse me, and 23057 of the city code to revise the composition of the Board of Adjustment as a citizen board, establish civil fines and for violations of conditions imposed by the Board of Adjustment, and revise the recommendations for special exemption granted by the Board of Adjustment. It's sponsored by Mr. Day and myself. So if you start to read, Mr. Day, if you'd like to take first shot at the reading.
Yeah, I
It's
think
gonna
you
be
have to,
lengthy once. We'll share this one.
do we have to have a motion?
To do a motion for first reading, get it seconded and approved, and then you do your reading.
Okay,
Thank you.
a motion for the reading.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
That's all you need.
Okay. Mr. Day, would you like to start?
Sure.
Mr. Day, hold on a second, please. I'm just a little out of whack here. Public comments from the floor now, before we start the reading. I do apologize for that. If there's any public, just identify yourself, where you're from, and we can go from there.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Dr. Bechtel.
I have no comment.
Okay, I'm sorry. You had your hand raised.
My apology if I did.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, I have Phil Gross.
Yes, good evening, Council. I must applaud Councilperson Day on his introducing this, I guess, bill or issue, because I firmly believe that who knows our town better than residents. So, Councilperson Day, I applaud you. And the other issue that's going to be brought up is by Councilman Souter. River Rise has been a long-standing issue, and I know it's been around in elections, and it feels like it's continued to be empty speech. So thank you for taking it, at least pushing it ahead. And I certainly be interested in being part of it, as I've worked on a few projects with University of Delaware regarding this. Thank you all.
Anyone else like to make a comment?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, we'll move on to ordinance number 534. Mr. Day?
Sure. An ordinance to amend section 230-53 and 230-57 of the city code to revise the composition of the Board of Adjustment as a citizen board, establish civil fines for the violation of conditions imposed by the Board of Adjustment, and revise the requirements for special exceptions granted by the Board of Adjustment. Whereas section 230-53 of the city code currently provides that the city's Board of Adjustment, the board, is comprised of the mayor, the city solicitor, and the city engineer. And whereas the city council believes it is in the best interest of the city of Newcastle for the board to be composed solely of city residents, and for the board members to be appointed by the council to multi-year staggered terms. And whereas the city council proposes to expand the Board of Adjustment to include the mayor and 4 appointees who are residents of the city, who shall serve upon confirmation by city council for 3-year terms, staggered to ensure continuity of board leadership and administration. And whereas under the proposed structure of the Board of Adjustment, it is necessary to clarify the role of the city solicitor in order to ensure the board is properly advised with respect to administrative and legal issues. And whereas under the proposed structure of the Board of Adjustment, it is further necessary to establish a role for the city planner or city engineer to provide recommendations on all pending applications before the board. And whereas the city council also acknowledges that improved means of enforcing and assuring compliance with conditions and safeguards prescribed by the Board of Adjustment in its decisions is necessary for the orderly administration of city affairs. And whereas the city council believes that implementation of a civil fining regimen that establishes a lien on real estate in favor of the city is the most effective and efficient means of enforcing such conditions and safeguards to the benefit of city administration and for the public welfare of city residents. And whereas certain provisions relating to special exception applications in the DG zoning district are currently included in section 230-21.1 of the code, but are more logically placed in section 230-57 of the code so as to apply to all special exception applications regardless of the zoning district. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Newcastle as follows. Section 1, section 230-53 of the city code is hereby amended and replaced in its entirety with the following. 230-53, creation members. A board of adjustment is hereby established, which shall consist of the mayor and 4 individuals who have been residents of the city of Newcastle for at least 1 year, appointed by city council. The mayor shall act as chairperson and permanent member of the Board of Adjustment. Of the remaining 4 members, the first new appointee to the Board of Adjustment shall serve for a term of 1 year. The second new appointee shall serve for a term of 2 years. The third and fourth new appointees shall serve for a term of 3 years. After the expiration of the initial terms of such newly appointed members of the Board of Adjustment, all subsequent appointments shall be for 3-year terms. B, the city council shall have the power and duty to fill all vacancies in the Board of Adjustment by appointment. Any such appointment to replace a member whose position becomes vacant for any reason prior to the expiration of that member's term shall be filled only for the remainder of that member's term. C, the city solicitor shall attend all meetings, hearings, and proceedings of the Board of Adjustment, including when sitting as the Board of Building Appeals, to ensure compliance with applicable law, respond to legal questions posed by the board, and to review, address, and provide recommendations regarding any legal and administrative issues which may rise or otherwise present themselves at such meetings. D, the city planner or city engineer shall attend all meetings, hearings, and proceedings of the Board of Adjustment. The city planner or city engineer shall review the application involved and such other materials and information as they deem appropriate. Prior to rendering any decision, the city planner or city engineer shall provide the Board of Adjustment with a recommendation as to the disposition of each matter presented for decision to the Board of Adjustment. Such review and recommendations shall not be binding on the Board of Adjustment and shall not apply to decisions of the Board of Building Appeals unless expressly required by law or requested by the board.
Okay.
Section
break?
2. Go ahead.
I was just saying, would you like a break or you can like to continue to go?
I'm okay.
Okay, just let me know.
Yep. Section 2. Section 230-57B2 is hereby deleted in its entirety and replaced with the following. 230-57B, special exceptions, conditions governing applications, procedures. 2, in considering any special exception application, the Board of Adjustment shall 1, consider the suitability of the property for the use desired, assure itself that the proposal is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of this chapter, the comprehensive plan, and other relevant plans. 2, determine the proposal will not substantially injure or detract from the use of neighboring property or from the character of the neighborhood, and that the use of the adjacent property is adequately safeguarded. 3, determine that the proposal will serve the best interest of the city, the convenience of the community, and benefit the public welfare. 4, consider the effect of the proposal upon the public services and facilities such as public water, sewer, police and fire protection, and public schools. 5, consider the probable effects upon highway traffic and pedestrian movements and ensure adequate access and circulation arrangements in order to protect major roads from undue congestion and hazard. 6, be guided in its decision by sound standards of subdivision and land development practices where applicable. 7, prescribe conditions and safeguards in addition to those otherwise required by city code as are necessary to assure that the intent of this chapter is complied with, which conditions may include, but are not limited to, harmonious design of buildings, planning, and its maintenance as a sight and sound screen, the minimizing of noxious, offensive, or hazardous elements, and adequate standards of parking, loading, and sanitation. Section 3, a new subsection 230-57B3 is hereby established and adopted, with which section shall read in its entirety as follows. 230-57B, special exceptions, conditions, governing applications, procedures. 3, violation of conditions and safeguards when made a part of the decision by which the special exemption is granted shall be deemed a violation of this chapter and punishable under 230-57F and 230-65F of this chapter. The Board of Adjustment shall prescribe a time limit within which the action for which the special exception is required shall be begun or completed, or both. Failure to begin or complete or both such action within the time limit set shall void the special exception. Section 4, Section 230-57C2 is hereby deleted in its entirety and replaced with the following. 230-57C, variances, conditions governing applications, procedures. 2, in granting any variance, the Board of Adjustment may prescribe appropriate conditions and safeguards in conformity with this chapter. Violation of such conditions and safeguards, when made a part of the decision by which the variance was granted, shall be deemed a violation of this chapter and punishable under 230-57F and 230-65F of this chapter. Section 5, Section 230-57F of the City Code is hereby amended and replaced in its entirety with the following. 230-57, powers and duties. F, decisions of the Board of Adjustment. 1, in exercising its various powers, the Board of Adjustment may, so long as such action is in conformity with the terms of this chapter, reverse or affirm, wholly or partly, or may modify the order, requirement, decision, or determination as ought to be made, and to that end shall have powers of the administrative official from whom the appeal is taken. 2, the concurring vote of the majority of the members of the board shall be necessary to reverse any order, requirement, decision, or determination of the administrative official, or to decide in favor of the applicant on any matter upon which it is required to pass under this chapter, or to affect any variation in the application of the chapter. 3, full compliance with any and all conditions and safeguards prescribed by the Board of Adjustment in rendering any decision is a prerequisite to the use or maintenance of the improvements or other variances authorized by such decision. Failure to abide by and comply with such conditions and safeguards runs contrary to the interests of the city, the health and welfare of its residents, and administrative economy and the rule of law. A, in the event of a violation or other failure to comply with such conditions and safeguards imposed by the Board of Adjustment, the code official send written notice of such violation or failure to comply via registered or certified U.S. mail to the legal owner of the property legal owner of the real property involved at the address maintained for such owner on the real estate tax rolls of the city, and to any tenant or occupant in possession of such real property at the property address. The written notice shall specify the corrective action to be taken and shall state that fines representing a lien on the real estate in question will be assessed if the violation or other failure to comply with conditions or safeguards is not corrected within 20 days from the mailing of such notice. B, the failure to correct such violations or to comply with any conditions or safeguards prescribed by the Board of Adjustment under 230-57 shall constitute a civil offense, subject to a fine of $100 for each day such failure to correct or comply continues, commencing 20 calendar days after mailing of the notice required by Section 230-57F3A. Such fines shall be the joint and several obligations of the legal title holder to the real property in question and any tenant or occupant of such property. C, any fines assessed by the code official under this section shall, until paid, constitute a civil debt due and owing to the city, and shall further constitute a lien in favor of the city on the subject real property, subject to condition or safeguard prescribed by the Board of Adjustment. The amount of the lien shall be considered a tax lien, executable as such via precipice, premonition, or otherwise, and shall include all court costs and legal fees associated with the enforcement of such line. D, in addition to any other available remedy for the violation or failure to comply with conditions or safeguards prescribed by the Board of Adjustment, the code official may, upon written notice to the legal title holder to the real property in question and any tenant or occupant of such property, temporarily or permanently revoke any outstanding building permit, certificate of occupancy, or other certificate, license, or permit issued by the city in connection with the real property that is the subject of such violation or non-compliance. E, appeals from the code official's assessment of a fine or revocation of any permit, license, or certificate for a violation or other failure to comply with condition or safeguard imposed by the Board of Adjustment may be taken to the Board of Adjustment in accordance with 230-55 of this chapter, provided such appeals are filed with the city within 20 days of such assessment or revocation. An appeal shall not be deemed timely filed until the appropriate filing fee has been paid to the city. F, the provisions of this section 230-57F3 shall apply to all conditions and safeguards imposed by the Board of Adjustment in connection with any special exception, variance, or other application, whether imposed prior to the adoption hereof or thereafter. Notwithstanding the foregoing, nothing in this section 2-57F3 is intended to, nor shall create an ex post facto criminal liability for pre-existing violations of this chapter. Section 6. If any section, subsection, sentence, clause, or phrase of this ordinance is for any reason to be held unconstitutional or invalid, such decision shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of this ordinance. Section 7. In the event any existing ordinances or parts of ordinances are in conflict herewith, the provisions of this ordinance shall control. Section 8. The ordinance shall become effective immediately upon passage. First reading July 20th, 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Day. You get a bottle of water. We can discuss this tonight, or, I mean, there was a lot there. I think a lot of us just saw this on Friday. We're going to have a second reading at the end of the month. I think we should probably take some time to study this, to digest it, and we can ask all questions at the second reading, if that's okay with everyone else.
But we have to have a special meeting, a hearing of sorts.
That's what I said, right. We're going to schedule that for the end of the month.
Okay.
I just have a technical comment. in section F that Mr. Day just read, under 230-57F, let me see, 3F. It says, the next to the last line says section 20-57F3, and I think it means 230, not 20. Is that correct, Mr. Day? Or
That's
Mr. Locke?
correct. That is correct, Ms. Souter. I noticed at least one other typo in here too. I'll have that corrected for you with a red line at the next hearing.
Okay, so that doesn't need an amendment or anything. It can just be corrected because we're at this early stage.
You'll do I'll make the corrections in a red line form, and when you vote on this at second reading, you'll vote to approve the amendments before voting on the ordinance itself.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, on our meeting on the 19th, that's a budget review meeting with a executive session. It doesn't include this at all. Am I correct?
No,
I am
it doesn't.
correct.
It's just going to be the budget.
So probably the hearing should be scheduled for before our next city council meeting. which
Correct.
Would be traditional.
Right. It will be the second reading and a public hearing.
Yes.
At
Okay.
that point, we can ask each other questions. We can ask Mr. Lasko questions, and we have the public comment on it also.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Next is council discussions concerning the appointment of a commission to evaluate and make recommendation concerning sea level rise. Councilperson Sauter, this is your project. Brought up a lot of interesting conversation as I walk through town. So if you want to kind of start walking us through it, that'd
Okay.
be nice.
All right. Well, the idea is that, we've had 1 or 2 DENREC studies already. They're sitting on the shelf somewhere. We're having another DENREC study ongoing right now that we'll be getting that report, I guess, sometime in the summer. We need to do something with this information. The city needs to make some decisions about what we're going to try to do to mitigate sea level rise. We can't stop it, obviously, but we need to deal with it. So we want to have this task force or commission review all this information and identify some priorities of what they think are the most important things for us to do, for the city to do. We'd like them to try to get some cost estimates and also to try to get some potential funding sources to help us identify what part the city's likely to have to pay. I mean, this is going to cost millions and millions of dollars. And as has been said in prior meetings, there are probably federal and state grants available to cover a good portion of it, but probably not all of it. And so, as Mr. Smith said, in our budget process, we need to plan, not just budget. And so I think it would be helpful for us to identify at least a rough estimate of what we're likely to have to pay to deal with this and over what time period. It's not something that's going to happen all in 1 year. And plan for that in our budget process, set money aside, perhaps some from these ARPA funds, I don't know. But we need to start thinking about it and identifying a potential source, identifying how much we might have to spend and a source, and start preparing for that. If it turns out the grants cover 100%, I'm sure we wouldn't have any trouble finding things to do with money we had set aside, other capital projects or whatever. And I also would hope that this task force would come up with a list of resources for property owners, because not everything has to be done by the city. Individual property holders have some responsibility too, but they need guidance. Things like raising their heating and air conditioning systems above ground level and that sort of thing. So that's the idea of what the purpose of this is. Mr. Day and I discussed it and thought perhaps 7 to 9 people on this commission. They would select their own chair from among themselves. We would like to have at least one person from each of the areas of the city that's most affected by sea level rise, including downtown, Van Dyke Village, Buttonwood, and Dobbinsville, perhaps also someone from the fire department and someone from the trust. we've identified some potential members, and since this has come out, I've had a couple of people volunteer. So that's the ideas. I mean, we wanted to throw it out here to get input from everyone before we actually wrote the resolution to establish the task force. The idea also is that the task force would have a defined timeline, perhaps an interim report in 6 months and a final report in a year. And if they need an extension, they can ask for it, but we don't want to just sort of throw this out there and let it spin on forever. We need some, just, you know, we need some movement. So.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Day, do you have anything to add to that before we take questions?
I
Councilperson
think she
Leary.
covered everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Councilperson Leary.
Councilperson Smith had his hand up first. I'll go second.
Ladies first.
Thank you. I think it's a great idea. And I like especially like the idea of a definitive dates to get back. Sometimes our things just drift on and on and on, and we really don't get a resolution. And so are these, Councilperson Souter and Councilperson Day, are these all volunteers or would these be appointees by council?
My thought was they'd be appointees, but obviously if people volunteer, you know, we would certainly take that into consideration. If we get more volunteers than we need, then we'll have to make a selection based on trying to get, as I said, people dispersed around the various parts of the city that are impacted by sea level rise, as well as perhaps their expertise. Obviously, people with an engineering background would be helpful. That's a question I had actually. Perhaps Mr. Bartel can help. If commission needs guidance or wants to ask questions of Mr. Athey or Mr. Roscoe for legal or engineering advice, do we have to write a budget into this resolution establishing the commission? How does that work?
Well, we certainly have a budget already for our city engineer and for our city solicitor, and we should, you know, we can look at where we are with, and I mean, to your point about looking at this next week, we can certainly take a look at where we are year to date with their budget, that type of thing. I mean, by the time you appoint some folks and get this ready, you know, we're going to be close to year end. I guess, so in the short term, I think we probably would be able to identify funds for this purpose. However, it would be helpful if we had some sort of an idea as to what your resource, what you would need from them early on. But then, of course, as we go further, you know, in other words, are you going to need them? You're going to meet first, and then you're going to decide what those resources might be.
Right.
So the easy answer to your question is, I think in this fiscal year, we should be able to identify some funds. And then if you go into next fiscal year, we'll add that as part of what you think you're going to need.
Okay, because I mean, I was thinking that perhaps if, you know, after this discussion tonight, we can prepare the resolution for next month, get it passed, then we have to get people in place. So they're not going to start till March or April. They can start by reviewing the existing information, which means they might not need that much, you know, they may have some questions after they do that. And then when this current study comes, they can review that against the background of what they've already learned from reviewing the existing information. So I agree. I doubt that they would need much money in this fiscal year. We might need to consider some additional funds for legal and engineering advice.
And in the budgetary process, as we get into the budgetary process in, you know, April, May, and June, as I said, we can either add to what we anticipate we'll need what we think we'll need going forward. We can either add to that with this budget or incorporate it somehow into that budget as part of what we normal.
And how does it work if they need advice from Mr. Bergstrom? If he attends a meeting in the evening, does he get paid overtime or does he get compensatory time off for?
Okay.
What?
He pretty much gets overtime.
Okay.
But again, that I don't think I'd worry too much as to, I'm not that concerned that would be too much of an issue.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, you had your hand up. Do you have a question?
I'm just going to say I wholeheartedly approve the idea, and I'm glad that Councilwoman Souter and Councilman Day have brought it forward. It's really past time. I was approached last week by a resident from the Strand and in their neighborhood, they were already talking about, sort of putting together an action committee. So I'm really glad to see it happen.
Yeah, I've been contacted by a resident of the Strand. Apparently, they have a group that's already met with Mr. Bergstrom a couple of times, and they're very concerned about the issues. Obviously, they're one of the areas most heavily impacted. So
Right.
I'm hoping to get at least one of the people from that group on this task force.
Yeah, I was afraid we'd have to wait for the big one before they got interested.
Apparently, the one that tossed all that rubbish up on the, logs and trash and stuff up on the banks of the river in October got them going.
The wind.
Mr. Platt, if I can just add to that real quickly, to the folks,
Go ahead, sir.
just to give a little historical perspective on that. They had a group of folks years ago, and I have I'm having a hard time remembering the exact time frame, but I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and they had put a group together, and they had met. We had met with Senator Poore and folks from the Conservation District, who, Ms. Souter, as you point out, Mr. Bergstrom has contacted. We've had some conversations with from the Conservation District as well at this point in time. But the problem that, just so you all are aware, since you brought it up, the problem that they had at that time was getting a consensus of everybody on the Strand to say, okay, we all want to do this. But the bottom line is, and the good thing is, they've had these discussions. The majority of them are aware of, or have advocated for this. So just to let you all know, that's kind of this, the historical perspective on that.
I have a couple questions, and I also guess one for Mr. Losco. Are you going to work in conjunction with like the state planning and Demarec? Because I mean, there's also, it seems like there's a few studies going on right now for this problem, and yes, it has to be addressed. But is that your purpose? Is to be a liaison between these groups, or are you going to have an independent review?
Well, I would hope they would work with DENREC. There's also some people in connection with the University of Delaware Sea Grant program that specifically deal with sea level rise hazards. And I contacted one of them just to get general information. She's currently working with the city of Lewis, who has a similar task force looking at the same issues for that city. I asked her if there was a fee for this, and she didn't answer that question. If we move forward, that would be something else to look at. But yes, I would hope, obviously, we would coordinate with DENREC and DEMA.
In the state. Okay.
Yeah.
And Mr. Losco, do we need a resolution to form this committee? I mean, we've
That would be
formed other
most-
committees in the past.
Yeah, that would be most appropriate to have a resolution so that you can not only appoint the particular members to the committee, but to also outline their duties and responsibilities.
Okay. Like I said, I guess my biggest concern is, and I don't like wasting people's time, and I like to see this group get together, but like I said, there's plans in motion already. So let's put it together and see what happens. And maybe since we're already working with DEMREC and we're working with this state, we can coordinate it and kind of just localize it a little bit better.
Right. I mean, yeah, certainly we don't want to reinvent the wheel from things that have already been done. That's a waste of everyone's time.
Right.
Well, I think an advantage here is that whatever DENREC comes up with, they're going to need commitment from the local residents. And if the local residents have already been involved in discussions and expressing their concerns, I think that it'll be much more likely that DENREC will get cooperation.
Okay. All right, we'll put it on next month's agenda. Mr. Losco, if you can work that resolution for us, maybe get up with Ms. Sodders, that'd be great. We can start looking
Should I send you a draft, Mr. Losco?
That would be wonderful to tell me what you particularly have in mind, and I'll whip it up.
Okay, well, Mr. Day and I will work that up, and then I'll send it to you. Thank you.
And we'll start looking for some volunteers also.
With a copy for you, Mr. Bertel.
I make a motion to adjourn, being no other business on the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Before we break, I don't see it on the agenda, but we had business from the floor and we had public comments, but I'm not clear if it was clear to the public that the public comments were for any topic, not just the agenda items.
No, they were not for agenda items. Normally, when we list them, they were listed as agenda items only. This was just strictly public comments.
Very good. Thank you.
So we had a motion and second. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye. All
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Everybody be safe out there.
right, good
You
night.
too.
Right.
Good night.